Hey everyone, how's it going? Let's talk about fear. Yes, fear, it affects all of us, but almost no one really understands how it works or how to face it head on. Let me start with a powerful truth. There are two types of fear. The first type seems like it comes from your mind, but in reality it isn't yours. It's something someone planted in your head. Someone said something, you believed it, accepted it, and now it's become a problem. But whose problem is it? Yours. And then that fear grows, paralyzes you, and keeps you from moving forward. The second type is real fear, the kind that comes as a physical response. But listen, did you know it's impossible to live without fear? That's right, fear is like a brain addiction. The brain needs circuits to function, and fear is one of the most powerful. So, what happens when we don't control it? It takes over. But what if I told you that you can turn fear into something that drives you forward instead of holding you back? Let me explain. Fear is like a seed. It only grows if it finds the right soil. And do you know what that soil is? Your mind. It's in your mind that fear finds space to take root, grow strong and take over. But if you learn to control what you plant in your mind, you can replace fear with things that build you up, that strengthen you, and I'm going to show you how. Before we dive deeper, a quick message for my YouTube audience. I know many of you watch without interacting, but if you're here, leave a like. Seriously, it costs you nothing and helps spread this message a lot. Let's balance the number of likes with the number of people here, okay? Done? Great. Let's dive into the real talk about fear. Back to fear. Have you ever stopped to think that fear is attractive? That's right. It has a magnetic power. In the Bible, in the book of Job, it says, "What I feared has come upon me." This means that what we focus on, even if it's negative, has an incredible power of attraction. It's like fear is a magnet. So, if we're going to attract something, why not attract good things? If we're going to feel fear, let it be about ridiculously positive things, like succeeding, achieving huge goals, or completely changing our lives. I've been through this myself. There was a time when I was on a high mountain, facing something I never thought I could handle. It was terrifying, but do you know what happened? I overcame it, and that completely changed my view of fear. I discovered it can be defeated, but to do so, we need to understand its nature and learn to redirect our thoughts. Another important point, fear, like any other addiction, needs to be replaced. The brain doesn't know how to function without a circuit, without something it constantly repeats. If you don't channel it into something good, it'll choose something on its own. And it's usually something that doesn't do you any good. That's why I create positive addictions in my life. Right now, I'm addicted to racing. Yep, I've invested heavily in race cars, simulators, even a professional team. That might sound crazy to some, but for me it's an addiction that moves me, challenges me, and helps me grow. Now think about this. What are the addictions you have? Are they addictions that build you up or tear you down? Because in the end, you're the one who chooses what to get addicted to. If you're addicted to something that doesn't uplift you, like drinking, smoking, or even negative thoughts, it's time to replace it. Swap it out for addictions that help you grow, that push you forward. And why did I call this concept anti-fear? Because that's exactly what it is. It's not about denying fear, but using it to your advantage, transforming what paralyzes you into something that drives you forward. Once you understand this, your life will never be the same. Now pay attention to something very important. When someone plants a seed of fear in your field, which in this case is your brain, you need to understand what's really happening. That seed doesn't just grow in isolation, like a passing thought. It multiplies. And not just a little. A single seed of fear can turn into thousands of negative outcomes. For example, someone tells you, you need stability, you can't take risks, you have to follow the safe path. And what happens? That idea, that seed, starts to grow inside you, and before you know it, you're living a limited life based on the fear someone else planted. This happened to me. Coming from a family where everyone talked about stability, I heard things like, you need a steady job, make about $5,000 a month. But is that the peak of life? Is that enough for someone who wants more? Think about it. These days, 10,000 reais won't even fill up a boat's tank for a full ride. But do you know what the real problem was? It wasn't the idea of stability itself, but how many times that idea was repeated. It's like someone watered that seed for years, turning fear into something that felt like the only possible reality. The result? You don't just harvest for yourself, you harvest for everyone around you. Then you become a massive warehouse of fear seeds. Worse yet, you start passing them on to others. Have you noticed how some people seem to spread fear from generation to generation? It's like a cycle. They were taught to fear, reaped fear in abundance, and now they plant that same fear in others. Things like, you need to be stable, you can't take risks, be careful what you say, be careful what you do. All of this is just a contaminated field. Now, I want you to stop and reflect. Imagine your mind as a field. You're in control of that field. You decide what will be planted there. But to do that, you need to do something essential. Clean that field. It's like taking a plow and ripping through the soil, pulling out everything planted by others that no longer serves you. Clear your soil, let it rest, and then consciously choose what you want to plant. Do you know what's the biggest fertilizer that feeds fear? It's the environment. It's being surrounded by people who are paralyzed, who never take action. You say, I want to start a business, and they reply, oh, but is that really a good idea? Wouldn't it be better to get a steady job? Or, that's too risky, be careful not to fail. This kind of environment is toxic because it reinforces the seeds of fear that have already been planted. Let me tell you something about myself. My life has always been driven by challenges. When I started my first business, a land development project, I didn't have any money, literally nothing. But do you know what I did? I moved forward anyway. The people around me said, you're crazy, what if it doesn't work out? And do you know what my response was? When have I ever failed before? This wasn't about arrogance, but about replacing fear with faith in my own abilities. Even without guarantees, I went for it and made it work. Today, things have changed. I no longer feel that pressure because, thank God, I've achieved financial stability. But you know what? I miss those days. I miss the challenge, the adrenaline of having to figure things out. That's what kept me moving. The point is this: you can't let other people's fears define who you are or what you can achieve. Fear is a seed, and your brain is the soil. If you keep letting others plant in your field, you'll end up harvesting things you never wanted. It's time to take control. Choose what you're going to plant, and, more importantly, pay attention to the environment around you. The environment can either be the fertilizer that strengthens your seeds or the poison that destroys your potential. Let's talk about a reality many people like to use to justify fear: negative numbers and statistics. Have you ever had someone say, 87% of businesses failed in the last 3 years because of the pandemic, or 600,000 businesses shut down in just 60 days? This kind of data seems informative, doesn't it? It seems like something you need to know to prepare yourself. But in practice, this isn't useful information. It's fertilizer for fear. Let me explain. Fear seeds are everywhere, free and readily available, and minds are ready to receive them because many people don't produce anything useful. They just consume and spread fear. Have you noticed how some people only talk about tragedies? I talk to some people, not naming names, and all they do is share negative news. Just tragedy, problems, disasters. Then they look at me and say, didn't you know about that? And my response is always the same, that no, I didn't, and I don't want to know. I haven't watched the news since 2016. And you know what happens? Someone always says, but that makes you uninformed. So I ask, okay, what did you gain from that information? Besides more fear, besides a useless seed that won't produce anything positive in your life? That's the big question. We're surrounded by people who consume and pass on fear, but never stop to ask themselves, is this helping me or paralyzing me? Now tell me, how many people do you know who pour all their emotions into external things like sports teams, politics, or even celebrities? If your only source of joy depends on something outside of you, I'm sorry, but that's emptiness. If your happiness depends on your team's performance or something you can't control, that's a sign you don't truly know yourself. Because those with a solid foundation, those grounded on the true rock, Christ, don't need that. They're not dependent on external circumstances for joy. Back to our theme. We have seeds, soil, fertilizer, and also a powerful enemy, pesticides. And do you know what the pesticide of fear is? It's inaction, it's paralysis. So, how do you combat fear? With something I call positive action facing fear. That's exactly what you need to take away from this. Positive action facing fear. It doesn't matter if you think you can't, if you feel unprepared, or if you simply don't want to. Do it anyway. I repeat, do it anyway. Because here's the difference between children and adults. Children do what they want. Adults do what needs to be done, period. Let me give you a personal example. Every day at home I get into the pool to exercise. And you know how the water feels? Freezing, Arctic, because I purposely turn off the heater. Why? Because I want to train my mind not to retreat in the face of discomfort. It's the same principle when I go biking with someone and I see them losing motivation. It doesn't matter. I keep going until the end. My rule is simple. I don't stop until I'm done. That's what you need to adopt in your life. The commitment to push through even when you don't feel like it, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Today I cycled 25 kilometers and rode alongside someone who I must say is good at every sport. But something curious happened. They seemed nervous riding next to me. I don't think they were used to it. In fact, they're probably in the auditorium next door right now, where another event is taking place. When they arrived, they said, "I came ready to cycle 100 kilometers today." I looked at them and asked, "Are you wearing underwear?" The response was, "Yes." So I said, "If you're wearing underwear, there's no way you're cycling 100 kilometers. Cycling gear is designed to be worn without underwear, or it'll chafe your groin. So let's lower the goal to 50 kilometers, okay?" We started pedaling, and soon I noticed their tire was flat. I explained, "With a tire like that, you won't make it 50 kilometers, and you might even puncture it." And as expected, the tire went flat. While fixing it, I took the opportunity to teach a few lessons. Do you think you can ride 100 kilometers like this? And with this loose frame, it's clear you weren't prepared. Do you think life is about luck? Life isn't about luck. It's about sowing and reaping. That's a rule that applies to every area. To show this in practice, I took them to a different bike trail. There were no flat terrains there, only climbs. When we reached the first hill, I heard, "I'm going to quit." I immediately replied, "No, but before that, repeat a phrase with me." They asked, "What phrase?" I said, "Behind one climb, there's another climb." They laughed, thinking I was going to say a descent. So I explained, "We're going from glory to glory. Our goal is heaven, and heaven is only reached by climbing. When a descent comes, that's a bonus, not something we should expect." We kept going for over an hour and a half. It was an intense workout, and as we pedaled, I taught an even bigger lesson. What matters isn't the strength of your body, but the strength of your mind. Fear isn't in the physical, I said. It's in the soul. It's in the mind. And do you know what's worse? You've been deceived. Deceived by an avalanche of negative seeds that were planted in you. But here's the solution. The pesticide that combats fear is simple. It's action. It's doing, even when you think you can't. In our cycling group, there were 16 people. Many quit before truly getting started. So I chose someone to help, Rodrigo. He's the only one who never backs out, always showing up when called. I started training him. When he said, "My leg hurts," I replied, "Then smile, even through the pain, because the strength you need is inside you, not in me or anyone else." People often have the illusion that strength comes from external sources. I've heard people say, "I found strength in someone else." That's a lie. Strength never comes from the outside. If you want strength, you'll have to find it within yourself, because that's where it is, inside you. No strength comes from another person. It may seem like you're inspired by someone, but in the end, it's up to you to access your own energy. Let me tell you something important. No one carries anyone else's burdens. Some people message me all the time saying, "If I touch you, I'll be healed." No, that's not how it works. That's all in your head. Strength, healing, transformation, all of that is inside you, not outside. That's why I say no one carries anything for anyone else. It's up to you to activate what already exists within you. And you know what the problem is? Some people don't understand this and continue to be deceived. It's fear that makes you believe you need someone or something external to move forward. The truth is, everything you need has already been placed within you. If we have the seed, the soil, and the fertilizer, what's missing? What's missing is a cycle. And that cycle only begins when you decide to sow and take action. Now let me give you an example. How many people do you know who spend 10, 20, or even 30 years not doing what they were called to do? They say, "Oh, I don't have the talent for that. I'm not creative." Oh, but let me ask you something. How can you not be creative if you are a child of God, the Creator? You were made in His image and likeness. Denying this is denying your own essence. Do you know what that is? It's fear speaking. It's the shame of putting yourself out there, of shining. But light isn't afraid to shine, is it? The ones who have a problem appearing are the shadows, because they can't stand the light. So stop hiding who you are. Let me share something about the human brain. Without even knowing you, I can confidently say this. Your brain has 99% unused space. And do you know what's worse? Most of that space sits idle, unproductive, while you're trapped in negative thoughts and fear. But there's a way to change that. Did you know you can make your brain productive even while you're sleeping? Yes, it's possible. I do it. I produce while sleeping, meditating, or even talking. You can train your brain to be so efficient that it's always engaged in productive activity. And if the brain is so powerful when idle, imagine when it's working at full capacity. Now, if you're carrying so much fear, I know why. You believe that fear is real, but often it's just a fantasy someone put in your head. At home, ever since my son Lorenzo was born, I've always told him, fear is afraid of us. Today, at 8 years old, he already understands this and says, fear is afraid of me. That's the kind of mindset we need to instill from a young age. When you let fear settle, it's like allowing a bird to build a nest in your head. Pay attention to this. You can't stop a bird from flying over your head or even trying to dirty it, but you have full control over whether it builds a nest there. The same goes for fear. You can't stop it from appearing, but you can decide whether it takes up residence in you. Life is like a big farm. Imagine you have 1,000 acres of land. It's impossible to prevent weeds from sprouting. But you know what you can do. Pull them out one by one, use technology, seek help and invent new techniques. The point is, you don't have to let the weeds take over your crops. You have the power to act, to remove what doesn't belong, and to protect what's valuable. That's the secret. Action. There's no point sitting around waiting for someone to fix things for you or for circumstances to change on their own. The cycle only completes with movement. So when fear comes, face it. When something seems impossible, do it anyway, because that's what transforms your land into fertile soil to reap everything you dream of. Let's imagine you have a large plantation. Everything is going well, but then someone comes and scatters weeds across your field. At first you might think about pulling them out one by one, but soon you realize that the more you tolerate those weeds, the harder they become to manage. The truth is, if you don't act quickly, you'll end up waiting until harvest time to try and solve the problem. And do you know what that means? A massive delay in your life. Now let me ask you a direct question. Are you afraid of being poor? Be honest. Most people are. And where does this fear come from? The news, comparisons, the idea that if something goes wrong, you'll lose everything. It's a fear that paralyzes. But the most important question is, in whom or what do you trust? Did you lose your job? Okay, but did you also lose your faith? Did someone criticize you, ruin your reputation in a town? Let me share something. I've faced situations where people slandered me online. I was attacked from all sides. Do you know what I did? I looked at the clock and counted. In 7 days, no one was talking about it anymore. That's how it is. Everything is temporary. The secret is to keep planting, even when others try to stop you. Because what happens when you stop? You start chasing after those trying to tear you down instead of continuing to move forward. Here's a clear example. Imagine someone steals one of your seeds. If you stop planting because of that, you're letting the thief win twice. Do you know what I do? I say, be blessed. Because honestly, stealing doesn't bless anyone. Thieves don't prosper. I keep planting because I know my future depends on the seeds I sow, not the ones that were stolen from me. Now, some people live in fear of everything, even criminals. They think there's a thief on every corner, ready to steal their cooktop. Do you know why these things happen? Because fear attracts. You're terrified of being robbed, and the thief, terrified of getting caught, ends up finding you. It's a cycle. So, how did I resolve this? I stopped watching TV. It's been 8 years since I last watched the news, and it has transformed my life. Let me explain the impact of this. If you consume news all day, you end up thinking the government is going to collapse, your business will fail, or the world is ending. This constant pressure destroys you. You can't think of solutions, you just keep feeding the fear. When I turned off the TV, the fear started fading on its own. I decided to focus on action, and action is what kills fear. Remember this: positive action facing fear. If something paralyzes you, face it. Don't wait for circumstances to change. Change yourself. There was a time when I had a partner training to win a UFC championship belt. I invested in him, trained alongside him, and learned a lot about facing challenges. Do you know what that taught me? That life has 3 modes you must master to win any battle. In life, you will always have to fight. And here's a truth. If you're in the fight, you're winning in some way, even if you're getting beaten up. But if you give up, you lose everything, even your dignity. Giving up is not an option. It's like in the UFC, there are 3 types of fighters. The first wins and takes the full prize. The second, even if they lose, still takes part of the prize. But the third, the one who quits, pays a penalty, loses the respect of sponsors, and walks away with nothing, a failure. Now I ask you, who are you? Are you someone who's taking hits but at least securing part of the victory? Or are you someone who has given up? Because the truth is, many people are programmed to quit. They're ready to abandon the dreams God placed in their hearts, to desert their calling and become absent from their purpose. And do you know what's worse? Most of them don't even realize they're giving up. Let me give you a real example. Recently, during one of my team's races, we were doing well, competing for key positions, when the car suddenly shut off right before the finish line. The engine died in the middle of the curve. Believe it or not, we crossed the finish line with the car turned off. We went on to the next race, and there I was, determined to win. I was in fourth place, pushing hard, and the car shut down again. At that moment, I told my team, I don't want excuses. I want a car that works. I don't need you to hand me the podium, but I want to compete with something that's within my control. Do you know what I did? I instituted a ritual before every race. Disassemble the entire car. I want every part taken apart, piece by piece, to find any flaw, any defect. If there's a crack, wear, or problem, I want to know about it. Someone on the team even complained, we don't need to go that far. But yes, we do. Because if Formula One cars, when with $500 million budgets, still break down, who am I to accept anything less? And do you know what the problem is? It's not just fear holding you back. There's something even sneakier: laziness. Procrastination is like fear's sibling. You know what needs to be done, but you keep putting it off, making excuses. Do you know what I say to that? Just go for it. Sometimes, we need to make tough decisions to protect our vision. I remember a case where someone in leadership tried to inject fear into the team. I called them over and said, "You can leave." They were shocked. "Are you kidding? I'm the best." I replied, "That's exactly why I'm asking you to leave." Sometimes, you need to act not because it's easy, but because it's necessary to protect the environment and values you're building. Some might think that's extreme, but do you know what's even more extreme? Letting fear take over. I lived for a long time under a culture loaded with fear. When I bought my first imported car, my mind was flooded with thoughts like, what will my dad think? What if the car breaks down? What if I don't have money to fix it? And here's the thing, I had the money, but the fear of scarcity was still there, paralyzing my mind. That's the danger of fear. It sneaks in, even when there's no logical reason for it to exist. So how do we deal with it? By constantly reframing fear. Reframing means identifying the block and redefining how you perceive it. During a recent ride through a forest, my heart brought up an old memory that I'd been carrying for years. Right there, in a matter of seconds, I reframed it and felt the weight lift off me. Because if you carry frustrations, they'll hold back your progress. This applies to everything: business, relationships, personal life. For example, if you failed in business, how motivated are you to start another? Not very, right? But that's exactly where the opportunity lies. Someone who's failed knows what not to do. If I meet someone who has failed at 4 businesses and another person in their 30s or 40s who's never tried anything, I'll choose the first one, because the one who has fallen knows how to get back up. Even better, they know how to avoid making the same mistakes. Now, the real problem arises when life's experiences start holding you back instead of pushing you forward. It's like climbing a mountain. It requires effort, persistence, and often makes you think about giving up. I asked a friend while we were climbing, "Do mountains prosper?" He, exhausted, replied, "They do, but the truth is they don't. Mountains stay where they are, always the same. It's you who prospers by facing and overcoming them." When we said goodbye that day, he went to his condo and I went to mine. His path had an almost impossible climb, one that seemed to lead straight to the heavens. I teased him, "You're not going to make it." He responded, "I'll handle it." And do you know what happened? He messaged me later, "I made it. It wrecked me, but I climbed it." That's the spirit, no matter how hard it seems. Climb the mountain, fight, face it. Sometimes we need to plant seeds of challenge. That's exactly what I did when I told him he wouldn't make it up that mountain. Why? Because living without challenges is a serious problem. Not challenging yourself is terrible. It's through challenges that we grow, advance, and discover what we're made of. Write this down. Challenges are essential for growth. Now let me share a powerful tip with you. It's possible to produce while you sleep. How? The answer lies in learning to truly rest, to enjoy peace. Not just when you wake up, but when you go to sleep as well. If you go to bed in peace, you'll wake up like a rocket, ready to act. But if you go to bed troubled, You'll wake up tired, drained. Want a simple practice to start with? Before lying down, smile. Just smile. It might seem silly, but it transforms your mental state. I've been doing this for 14 years. When I go to bed, I turn to the side and think of something funny. Sometimes I even laugh out loud before drifting off. When I wake up, my body's first reaction is to smile. Even on days when I'm angry, that involuntary smile changes everything. It's as if the last gesture before sleep programs the energy you wake up with. Sleeping isn't just about recharging your batteries. It's a time to produce, to dream, to receive visions, and to find peace. Now let me explain something important. Results heal. It's useless to take all these tips, apply them, and not seek results. The cure for many fears and insecurities lies in the results you achieve. And honestly, you wouldn't be here listening to me if I were just some guy driving a 1987 Chevette. Nothing against the Chevette, but people follow those who have results, who have reached where they want to go. So what did you come here to learn? How to achieve results, how to dominate a space and rule within it. Here's the key: self-governance. Write down that phrase. Self-governance means ruling over yourself, having control over your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions. It's self-mastery that enables you to achieve anything. Let me share a personal story. I was shopping for furniture for my house at one of the most expensive stores in São Paulo. Right next door was a Ferrari dealership. While my wife was in the furniture store, I stood outside the Ferrari showroom, looking through the window. And do you know what happened? I couldn't go in. My feet froze. It was fear speaking again. I paced back and forth, staring at those Ferraris, some costing over 3 million reais, and kept asking myself, why can't I go in? It was a ridiculous fear, but it was there, the feeling that I didn't belong in that place, that it wasn't for me. After pacing back and forth almost in tears, I gave up and went into the furniture store. I spent what I needed there, but the fear of stepping into the Ferrari showroom stayed with me. It was one of the most inexplicable fears I've ever experienced, but it taught me something important. Sometimes fear doesn't make sense. It just appears, and it's up to you to face it. After that episode at the Ferrari dealership, I left feeling strange, like the showroom was my enemy. I went home and took a shower, because honestly, some of the biggest breakthroughs in my life have either happened inside a car or while I was in the shower. As the water fell, I began to reflect. Where did that feeling come from? Why is Ferrari such a problem in my head? That's when I remembered a conversation I had when I was 16. A friend told me about a famous singer from Goiás who wanted to buy a Ferrari but couldn't because the brand wouldn't sell the car to him directly. They said he didn't have an important enough name, so he could only purchase a used Ferrari. At that moment, without realizing it, that story planted a limiting belief in my mind. When I returned to the store later to pick out more furniture, I stood at the Ferrari showroom door and said to myself, I don't care about you. From that point on, my relationship with that fear began to change. Eventually, I bought a Ferrari. But do you know what happened when I finally owned one? I realized it wasn't anything special. I called my kids over and said, let's take this car apart. We started dismantling it piece by piece to understand what was so extraordinary about it. Today, 30% of the Ferrari is disassembled in my garage. Do you know what I discovered? It's just a car. The magic disappeared, and with it, so did the fear. This taught me something powerful. As long as your body isn't glorified, you'll always face blocks. But the key is to break through them as quickly as possible. The faster you confront and resolve those barriers, the faster you'll move forward. Sometimes it's small things. Other times it's like an entire highway of blockages you need to clear. Think of it like removing lice, one by one, until they're all gone. Now understand, this isn't about cars, houses, or anything material. It's about you governing your own life. When you see yourself as smaller than a car, a job, or even a college degree, you limit yourself. But when you understand that you were made in the image and likeness of God, everything changes. This doesn't mean undervaluing others, but rather recognizing the value He placed in you. That recognition destroys fear. I remember another principle that changed my life. I don't care about my reputation. Do you know what keeps many people trapped in fear? Worrying about what others think. But I decided to play what I call the game of fruits, and that reduced my fear by half. What is the game of fruits? It's living focused on the results that last. When you do what you were born to do, people might criticize you for a year or two, but eventually they come back because your fruits speak for themselves. You don't need to please everyone, nor sit at every table. When I realized this, my life became much lighter. There are tables where people profess things that go against my principles. Why force myself to be there? The game of fruits teaches that even your enemies will recognize your results and eventually come to you. It's not about being at the best tables, but about doing what you were called to do. Let me share something with you. One of the best feelings in life is when an enemy apologizes. It's liberating. Do you know why 2021 was one of the most transformative years for me? Because even though it was my worst year in many aspects, I resolved more relationship issues during that period than ever before, one after the other. And the most interesting part? I didn't have to chase anyone. The secret? Fruits that last. When you focus on producing results, conflicts resolve themselves, people come to you, and when that happens, you realize it wasn't about them, it was about me. That's how you create the space to address unresolved issues. Now, if you're afraid of upsetting others, understand this. Sometimes it's necessary to disappoint people. Many spend 30 years trying to please everyone, parents, bosses, pastors, and all it does is keep them from living the purpose God placed within them. Let me tell you a personal story. When I wanted to marry Carol, some people in religious circles said it wasn't a good idea. Why? Because she was rich and I was poor. Can you believe that? They tried to plant the idea that our love didn't matter, that the difference in social class would be a problem. But you know what I did? I didn't listen. Love won. And today I can say that without Carol, I might not be here. I might never have dreamed of becoming wealthy or building something bigger. In fact, the first time I wanted to buy a car, I thought about getting a Volkswagen Beetle with 18-inch rims and suicide doors. My mum tried to stop me, saying, "How are you going to pick up Carol in a luxury condo with that car?" But do you know what happened? Carol never cared about any of that. When we were 16, she used to ride with me on a simple $25 bike and she was happy. She laughed and I thought, this doesn't make sense, but I'm going to marry this woman. That's the point. When you understand what truly matters, fear loses its power. The limiting beliefs that hold you back start to disappear. But pay attention. Beliefs are like ammunition. If you don't know where to aim, you'll waste all your energy. To become invincible, write this down. I am more than a conqueror. Why is this so powerful? Because Jesus already won for us. He died to save us and gave us a kingdom. So why would I aim to be just a conqueror? I'm already more than a conqueror. Think about this. The probability of you being born is 1 in 400 trillion. The fact that you exist is already an incredible victory. It wasn't something you planned or achieved through effort. You made it here. That alone is proof that you've already won. What's left then? Just to accept it. The rest is about facing challenges and moving forward. One time a guy called me and said, "You're saying things I don't like." My response was simple. "Friend, figure that out in your own head. I'm at peace." Because in the end, what matters isn't pleasing everyone. It's living with purpose, bearing fruit, and staying faithful to the calling God placed on your life. It's amazing how people spend more time talking about others than taking care of their own lives. I get questions on Instagram every day like, "Are you a Freemason?" My response is always the same. Why are you so worried about that? It's funny how people make assumptions without knowing anything about what I've been through, the price I've paid, or the effort that's brought me here. No one saw me waking up at 4:30 a.m. every day. No one saw me reading books, giving thousands of talks, or learning from my mistakes. But these same people invent stories to justify what they don't understand. Do you know why people do that? To justify their dissatisfaction with their own lives. The truth is, when you start to grow, people look for something or someone to blame. And if they can't find anything, they'll make something up. But let me tell you something. I know who's truly responsible for everything I've achieved. And it's not my earthly father, it's the eternal Father. He is the source of it all. Now here's a deep reflection. Did you know you can reprogram your mind? That you can choose what to believe and how to react? When I look at a person, even someone labeled a criminal, I don't see what others see. I see a program that was installed in their mind. I'm reminded of Jesus on the cross with 2 men beside him. One mocked and rejected change. The other asked, "Remember me in your kingdom." And Jesus replied, "Today you will be with me in paradise." This teaches me something powerful. You can choose to be reprogrammed. You can decide to leave behind the beliefs and fears that hold you back. Fear is like extra weight in your canoe. It makes you sink instead of float. And do you know what happens when you throw that weight off? The canoe becomes lighter and you start to flow. Now imagine a bridge you need to cross. That bridge can only hold the weight of your true identity. Anything beyond that, fears, insecurities, worries, will make the bridge collapse. That's why Proverbs 4:7 says, "Sell everything you have and acquire wisdom." This means letting go of fears and burdens that lead you nowhere. Because what you own today, and whether material possessions or even titles, isn't what defines you. What matters is how God has always seen you from the beginning. When you see that, life transforms. The fear of public speaking, the fear of failure, or any other fear starts to seem ridiculous. You realize that the only thing that truly matters is living according to who God created you to be. And when you start confronting your fears, do you know what happens? You laugh at them. Because deep down they never made sense. Fear paralyzes us in so many ways, often without us realizing it. Fear of disappointing someone, fear of trying something new, fear of investing in what you truly believe in. But let me tell you something. Every great step requires courage. I remember a story from Napoleon Hill's book that completely unlocked my mindset. He was afraid of being murdered, running with the only money he had. Do you know what he did? He went to a luxury hotel. He was trembling, afraid of spending everything, but he made that decision. And in that moment he realized fear could no longer control him. That made me think I was called to be a king and a priest. Am I living like one? The truth was I wasn't. I was a good priest, but hadn't yet become a good king, prince, or patriarch. I decided everything had to change. Since then I've started making bold decisions, like investing heavily in what truly matters. A lot of people ask me, how do you have the courage to spend 11 million rays on renovating your house? My answer is simple. Do you know the people who live there? They are the most important people on earth to me. And do you know who unlocked this mindset for me? Flavio Augusto. One day, visiting his house valued at $40 million, I asked, "Why invest so much in a house?" And he replied, "Because the most important people are there." That response etched itself into my mind. It's not about the money. It's about prioritizing what truly matters. If it were the old Pablo, I would never have had the courage to do this. When I bought my house, I remember saying to Carol, "Accept the house as it is. Its identity is already complete." She was upset and replied, "But this house doesn't reflect who you are." That hit me deeply. I started to see what she saw. The house didn't reflect our identity. So we tore down columns, extended structures, and adjusted every detail. The uneven pool was leveled, marble was installed, imported doors were added. Suddenly, everything began to make sense. In the end, I realized investing in something that represents who you are is always worth it. Now, let me tell you something important. If you're trying to control others, be careful. You might be just another victim of a system that manipulates you without you even knowing it. Don't waste time trying to control someone who is free. Freedom provokes. When I speak, sometimes I use words that shock because they expose this very thing, the attempt to control language, emotions, and other people's freedom. Some people try to appear falsely holy, to please others, forgetting that God doesn't look at you through your sins. He looks at Christ who lives in you. Remember Isaiah, who confessed to being a man of unclean lips, yet his heart was right before God. Or Jesus, who called some people a brood of vipers. That was the worst insult in the Jewish context. Don't confuse the gentleness of the lamb with weakness. There is a lion within you too. If you live only as a lamb, always submissive and fearful, you'll never achieve what you were called to be. Let me share something crucial. Living in fear is like planting a harvest you never wanted. Fear, when allowed to grow, becomes like an uncontrolled crop. The problem? One day, you'll have to reap it, and that harvest can be devastating. Fear is like inertia, a force that keeps you stuck or moving at the same pace without progress. If you haven't prospered in the last 10 years, it's the same as standing still. Believe this. You were created to prosper, and prosperity, like everything in creation, follows cycles. Look at the seasons of the year. They reveal the glory of the Creator. Why would you be any different? Trees have times when they bear fruit, and times when they lose their leaves. Rivers have seasons when they are full and others when they are nearly dry. Storms come and go, droughts come and go. That's how it works. And do you know what this means? When the leaves fall, the tree hasn't stopped prospering. It's simply renewing itself, shedding what's no longer needed to make room for the new. You need to do the same. When old things pass away, it's a sign that new ones are on their way. And if you don't make use of what God has given you, know this: others will take it. If no one takes it, the fruits will fall to the ground and rot. That's natural. What's amazing is that the more you enjoy your fruits at the right time, the more strength you give your tree to produce again. A tree whose fruits aren't picked weakens. The same happens to you. When we don't enjoy what we've achieved, we grow weak. Many people live tired, exhausted. When I ask why, I hear something like, "I can't stop working." Do you know what that is? A tree that never rests. You need to understand cycles. There's a time to work, a time to rest, and a time to enjoy. When you understand this, fear loses its power, because you begin to recognize the phases of your life and act accordingly. Recognizing the cycles allows you to prosper without burnout. It teaches you to celebrate what you've achieved while staying ready for the next season. Because life isn't just about producing, it's about learning to enjoy and trust the process. Let me share an experience of mine. Sometimes I walk past the entrance to my company, a huge building that I find amazing, and decide, today I'm not going in. This happens about 4 times a week. My office is incredible, with space for everything I enjoy, from golf to ping pong. But there are days when I say, today I want to do something else. And do you know why? Because I've realized that life isn't just about working or staying busy. It's about enjoying what you've already built. And do you know what's even more interesting? Recently I had a dream where I bought every building on a street. I woke up and thought, maybe that's what I'll do. The point is, when you understand the cycles of life and learn to enjoy them, your vision expands. You stop being controlled by fear or routine and start dreaming bigger. Do you know what's great? Being free. But let me tell you something. Freedom doesn't come for free. You're not just going to wake up one day and feel free. To get there, you'll need to give more of yourself than you can imagine. You'll need to wake up earlier, go to bed later, and surround yourself with people operating on levels you didn't think were possible. Write this down. Places, people, and experiences. These 3 things have the power to unlock your mind. Often what we need to move forward is found in the environment we place ourselves in, the people we connect with, or the experiences we choose to embrace. Just yesterday I was talking with Marcos by the lake. We talked about the future, wild ideas, and trips we haven't taken yet, but want to. Every international trip I've made wasn't just for leisure, it was to unlock my mind. Each country, each culture, and each experience opened new codes in my thinking. I remember when I went to Bolivia. I was there to sell clothes for my father-in-law's business. I carried heavy suitcases, had a long beard, and always felt like people looked at me strangely. I didn't feel welcome. I asked the people with me, "What's going on? Why do they look at me like that?" No one could answer. I started researching, talking to local businesses, and then I realized it was my appearance. In that context, my long beard created a cultural distance. As soon as I made a simple change, everything shifted. People started welcoming me. I learned that sometimes the code to move forward is in the details, in how we adjust to our surroundings. In Israel, I had another profound experience. When I stepped foot there, all the doubts I had about the Bible disappeared. Not because my faith increased, but because I didn't need faith to believe certain things anymore. I saw them with my own eyes. Faith is essential when you don't see, but when you experience the reality, faith becomes an unnecessary foundation for what is already evident. Remember this, freedom and growth come from the willingness to step out of the ordinary, to open yourself to the unknown, and to face whatever is necessary. Places, people, and experiences shape who we are and help us achieve what once seemed impossible. So if today you feel stuck, limited, start by changing the environment around you, connect with people who challenge you, and expose yourself to situations that feel bigger than you. That's where transformation happens. In life, don't make excuses for anything. One day I was heading to check out some land I had purchased, and halfway there my car's engine broke down. At that moment, a silly belief almost formed in my mind. Did the engine break because I peed on the side of the road? Rationally, I knew it didn't make sense. But when we're frustrated, we tend to look for explanations for what we can't control. The key is to recognize those thoughts, laugh at them, and refocus on what truly matters. Moving forward, growing, and embracing the journey. We were just 500 kilometers away. A friend suggested, "Let's call for help and go back." My response was immediate. I don't go back, not even to gain momentum. I always move forward, even if I have to roll. And that's exactly what we did. We took a night bus to continue the trip to Palmas. The situation got worse around 1 a.m. When the bus's air conditioner started dripping water on my leg, my friend, incredulous, said, "I've never seen this in my life." And I laughed. I laughed until 7 a.m., with nothing else to do. I looked at the situation and thought, this house has leaks, dripping on me. That, my friends, is reframing. Reframing is turning what seems like a problem into something that drives you forward. It's a powerful skill. Want to live in peace? Reframe everything, even the bad things that happen. Do you know what I learned from entrepreneurs in Palo Alto in Silicon Valley? They are masters of reframing. Sure, they're often seen as cold, but here's the detail. To reframe, you need to expose yourself to many different experiences. Study in various schools, live in different cities, meet lots of people. If you're still only hanging out with childhood friends and have never left your comfort zone, you're stuck. Moving to a new city, making new friends, and living new experiences forces your mind to adapt, reinvent itself, and reframe. Now, here's a powerful principle. Perfect love casts out all fear. Write that down. You might not fully understand it now, but let me explain with a personal story. When I was 14, I picked a fight with a guy because I liked a girl. I didn't know the guy was a well-known criminal in Parque Ateneu in Goiânia. He gathered his friends to beat me up after school. When I left, there was a whole group waiting to attack me. Then something happened that I'll never forget. A man, alone, who was part of the Vila Nova soccer supporters, saw what was happening and decided to intervene. He came up, hugged me, and said to everyone, "No one touches him, he's one of ours." That man, whom I'd never seen before, saved me. He didn't know who I was, but chose to act for me. In that moment, the fear disappeared completely. That's the power of love. It protects you, gives you courage, and reminds you of your worth. When you feel loved, there's no room for fear. That's why perfect love casts out all fear. It connects us, strengthens us, and frees us to live fully. The day that dangerous man from Parque Ateneu put his hand on my shoulder and said no one would touch me was one of the most defining moments of my life. I won't lie to you. There have been few times in my life when I felt so overwhelmingly loved. I can count them on one hand. The first was on my wedding day. The second was when Lorenzo jumped into the pool trusting me, even though he didn't know how to swim. And the third was that unexpected embrace from the criminals. On that day, I lost my fear. I walked alone, but I was calm, as if nothing could harm me. Now imagine the Creator saying something even more powerful to you. You are loved. I desired you to be in this generation. I called you to make a difference, to not bow your head to anyone. Many will rise against you, even within your own house. But don't worry, I am with you. When you understand and accept this as truth, everything changes. Fear loses its power. You stop seeing life through the lens of limitations and begin to recognize the strength that comes from being unconditionally loved. It's this love that sets you free to move forward, no matter what challenges stand in your way. Another moment that marked my life was a meeting with 120 executives from Brazil Telecom in Angra dos Reis. The global vice president of Oi, Bruno Espírito Santo, looked at the auditorium and asked, "Where's Pablo from Goiânia?" He knew my name, and that deeply impacted me. In seconds, it felt like I had doubled in size. I felt seen, recognized, as if something inside me had been validated at that moment. Later, the company president approached me in the restroom and asked about the meaning of a word I had used in my talk, intrepidez. He had never heard that word before. I do this on purpose during my talks. I throw out words that provoke thought, that push people out of their comfort zones. Intrepidez means bold courage, fearless confidence, and that's exactly what we need to overcome fear. So, how do you get rid of fear? The first step is to feel loved. The most genuine love there is comes from God. It's an unconditional love that doesn't depend on what you do or don't do. He loved you even before you were born. He proved it by giving his own son for you. When you live in that love, there's no room for fear. It simply vanishes. Do you know the difference between someone who accepted Christ in 1994 and someone who accepted him today? The one who accepted him today is reaping the fresh fruits of that love, while the other may have forgotten to live in the fullness of what they've already accessed. Access is something we need to renew daily, because the world and our limiting beliefs constantly try to make us forget. And speaking of facing fears, let me share something I heard today. A man in the auditorium stood up and said he had lost his mother yesterday. He had the choice to be at the funeral, 700 kilometers away, but he decided to be here, even while carrying the weight of grief. He said, "I came because I need to face this fear and not let it consume me." His decision to be present, to step into a new cycle, is something transcendent. It's not about what he lost, but about what he chose to gain. A new stance, a new beginning. Legitimate grief is a process. It's a cycle of disconnection. but also one of renewal. It's more about our ego than about the person who has passed. When someone we love is gone, what we really face is the pain of not having them with us anymore. But that pain can also propel us forward. His stance showed exactly that. A decision to step into a new cycle, even in the face of suffering. That's courage. That's intrepidez. Do you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who has entered a new phase. Even without knowing who you were before, it's clear that something has changed. You're ready to face any challenge. This is a moment of transition, and moments like these can make us feel more vulnerable. But if you go through grief consciously, without trying to shorten it, you'll find the strength needed to move forward. Legitimate grief lasts 70 days. Don't try to cut it short. When Jesus called his disciples, he said something that might sound harsh. Let the dead bury their dead. This wasn't insensitivity. It was about recognizing the cycle and moving forward. You've made a difficult decision by being here today, but let me tell you, don't look back. No matter what people say or the criticisms you might face, keep moving forward. Now let's address Celso's question. Celso, you mentioned something deeply resonant. You lost your job, felt lost and distant from God, and yet you're here. Let me tell you something. Love conquers fear. This isn't just a pretty phrase, it's a life code. When you allow yourself to be loved, truly loved, fear loses its grip. Fear thrives in isolation, but love thrives in connection. Whether it's grief, job loss, or any other challenge, the path forward isn't to avoid pain but to embrace love. The kind of love that reminds you of your worth, your purpose, and your ability to keep going. Let that love guide you, and fear will have no choice but to retreat. You said you need this. So let me offer you two things. A hug or a seed. Which one do you choose? The seed, right? Because seeds have power. They are small beginnings that, when nurtured, grow into significant results. Take this seed, put it in your pocket, and remember that it's a symbol. Don't talk about fear anymore. Start acting even with fear present. Here's something many people need to understand. Not every decision will bring immediate results. Sometimes the purpose of a decision isn't the outcome, but the experience. The decision takes you to a step, and that step prepares you for the next. It's about building strength, gaining resilience, and climbing the ladder. Don't expect one decision to give you everything all at once. This isn't about quick results, it's about transformation. Some of you might be blaming the pandemic, the market, or other circumstances. But here's the truth. You didn't lose your job. You were pushed out of it to live something new. The fear you feel isn't about failing. It's about facing a new experience. And do you know what's most important? Understanding that the value lies in the journey, not the destination. Before God, I stopped worrying about how much I would earn years ago. What matters is that if He is for me, who can be against me? The only person who can be against me is myself. Write this down. Me against myself. That's the real challenge. Conquering fear is about overcoming the limitations you impose on yourself. It's about deciding that love and faith will have the final word, not fear. Here's the point you need to understand. It's not about others. It's not about the person who fired you, the one who spoke badly about you, or the one who rejected you. It's about how you accept and react to it. If you've been fired, you have two choices. Either you go back, apologize, and try to get your job back, which most of the time isn't the best choice, or you understand that a kick in the backside is actually a push forward. And when it happens, put your hand on your backside and say thank you for the push. The same applies to relationships. If someone breaks up with you, instead of lamenting, be thankful for the kick. Maybe you were emotionally dependent and needed that breakup to start something new. Whether it's work, love, or even in church, remember this. Sometimes God allows us to be pushed out of a situation because He has something greater for us to live. Think of Joseph. If his brothers hadn't sold him into slavery, the people of Israel wouldn't have been saved from famine. Joseph was rejected and cast out, but that push led him to a place where he could fulfill God's purpose. Joseph didn't rise to power in Egypt by chance. He was well trained by his father, Jacob, Israel, and above all, was obedient to God. That's what gives someone the power to govern, self-mastery. Throughout the Bible, everyone who learned to govern themselves was empowered to govern others. Those who lacked this control lost everything. Judas is a clear example. He wanted a revolution, but acted prematurely. In his impatience, he betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver and was later consumed by guilt, unable to manage his own emotions. This is the lesson. Don't let fear, rejection, or setbacks define you. Instead, Let them propel you forward. Plant the seed, nurture it, and trust the process. The fruit may not come immediately, but when it does, it will be abundant and lasting. Stay faithful, stay patient, and remember that God's plans are always bigger than the challenges you face. Here's the lesson. Fear isn't defeated by strength or success. Fear is defeated when we understand who God is and who we are in Him. You're afraid because you think everything depends on you, but let me tell you something. It doesn't. When you realize that He is the source of everything, you discover who you truly are. Now write this down. I need to live new experiences, submit myself to new things, face risks, embrace the unknown. This is essential for growth. There's no other way. If you keep living in the same conditions, in the same environment, trapped by the same fears, there won't be any transformation. No one conquers fear without feeling loved. Some people in the business world try to compensate for this lack of love with excessive self-sufficiency, but that drains their energy. When you understand God's love, the source changes. The love that comes from Him doesn't deplete your energy. It renews and overflows. When you ask God to show you how He sees you, something incredible happens. You start seeing yourself through His eyes, and that's transformative. Do you know what happens when you live in that love? Fear disappears, because love empowers you to overflow. Even when you think you can't handle it, love moves you. It connects you to something greater than yourself. May each of you have the courage to face your fears, the strength to live new experiences, and the love to overflow in every action. Fear has no power over those who know they are loved. Let me share a powerful story about transformation. A woman told me that 6 months ago, she was unemployed and going through a depressive episode. But what marked her journey wasn't just finding a new job, it was something deeper. She felt loved by God. That love helped her heal old wounds, especially those she had passed on to her daughters. She said something that moved me deeply. When I felt loved by God, I was able to share that love with my daughters, and it healed our relationship. Today, she helps others through mentoring because she loves seeing lives transformed. Her home is completely different after this experience. She even mentioned that her relationship with her mother, which used to be strained, is now wonderful. There's no greater gratitude than this. The love we receive from God overflowing to heal and transform everything around us. She made a point to say, "I'm not here to flatter you, Pablo. I'm here because I recognize the transformation this process has brought to my life." And do you know what this reinforces? That genuine love and the effort to grow make all the difference. Another participant, Sylviane, came from Sorocaba to share something special. She said, "I can't accept so many young people with a limited vision. I've always felt we needed to bring the Holy Spirit to people in a renewed way, especially through digital platforms." She found my work during a difficult time in her life and realized it was exactly what she needed. It wasn't by chance. She said something that made me laugh and reflect. "I was on YouTube, thought it was an ad, but it was actually God showing me the way." Sylviane understood something essential. The Holy Spirit transforms. He shapes, teaches, and guides. What we do here isn't just about techniques or strategies. It's about crawling, learning, and growing spiritually, like a baby being formed. The stories of these two women highlight a universal truth. God's love transforms. It removes fear, restores relationships, and gives us the strength to step into the unknown. When you live in His love, you stop trying to control everything and start trusting in the process He's leading you through. Fear loses its grip, and life becomes an ongoing journey of growth and renewal. However, she raised an important question. Why do so many people carry your work forward, but forget to bring the Holy Spirit to truly transform people's homes? My response was clear. Hold on. Not everyone has the experience or depth required to do that yet. We can't demand something from people they aren't ready to deliver. Don't become a critic of others' work. Everyone has their time, their journey. This dialogue reinforces something we've discussed before. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about being willing to be shaped, to grow, and to overflow with God's love. When you live in that love, your life changes. It empowers you to overcome fear, heal relationships, and connect with the greater purpose God has for you. Sometimes the most powerful messages come at what seem like unexpected moments. I remember a conversation with someone who said, "I want to level up." He was seeking something deeper, something that burned in his heart. I told him, "The time is now. Whatever you're asking from me, say it directly to Jesus. He's going to break you, but in the best way. He'll transform you." Because that's what happens when we're honest with God. He confronts us, shapes us, and takes us to a new level. Speaking of transformations, let me share an incredible testimony. Kayla Cordero, a pastor for 25 years, faced the hardest moment of her life during the pandemic. While dealing with the impact of divorce, she was excluded from her church and ready to give up everything. Amid that chaos, she joined one of my live sessions. I remember clearly what I said to her that day. Kayla, pastor, go take care of your life. Send your flock elsewhere and go take care of yourself. It might have sounded harsh, but it was exactly what she needed to hear. She told me that in that moment something awakened within her. The lioness woke up, as she put it. She decided to leave behind religiosity, move to a new city, and start over. Today she lives in Alphaville, healing from deep wounds, helping other women rise, and most importantly, she knows who she is. These stories remind me of something vital. The true impact isn't just in what I do, but in what God does through me and each person who decides to open up to Him. It doesn't matter the past, the pain, or the blockages. When you surrender and allow yourself to be shaped, everything changes. Now let me address a question from someone with a unique spiritual background. He said, "My name is Fatal. I come from a Muslim family and became a Christian through my wife. But throughout this journey, I've faced conflicts within my family, especially regarding the lineage of Ishmael and Isaac in the Bible. Where was Ishmael when he passed away?" This is a profound question because it's not just about location. It's about identity and reconciliation. In the Bible, Ishmael is acknowledged as a son of Abraham, and God made promises to him as well. He wasn't rejected. God cared for Ishmael and made him the father of a great nation. The conflict between the descendants of Ishmael and Isaac is more human than divine. God never divided. He always cared for everyone. When you view Scripture through the lens of God's love, you realize that He has a plan for each of us. It doesn't matter your origin, culture, or history. God's love transcends all barriers. His promises are not limited to a single lineage or people. They are woven into the lives of all who seek Him. This question highlights something universal. The struggles we face with identity and belonging are opportunities to see how deeply God loves and cares for us. Just as He had a plan for both Ishmael and Isaac, He has a unique purpose for you too, one that bridges divides and reconciles differences. True reconciliation lies in understanding that in Christ, we are all heirs of the same kingdom. So if you're facing conflicts within your family because of your faith, know this: your journey with God is not about dividing, but about adding. Keep walking in love and patience. Your life can be the greatest testimony your family will ever witness. For everyone here today, it doesn't matter where you came from or what battles you carry. What matters is where God is taking you. Fear, the past, doubts, all of it loses its power when you choose to live in love, faith, and courage. Let me explain something about the story of Ishmael and Isaac. In the Bible, Isaac is identified as the son of the promise, but Ishmael was also blessed by God. In Islamic tradition, there's a common interpretation that Ishmael was the one taken for sacrifice, but the biblical narrative points to Isaac. Here's the crucial point. When you enter the new covenant, everything changes. You are no longer just a descendant of Ishmael or Isaac by blood. You become an heir through Christ. That is what truly matters. Don't let cultural or familial pressures define your identity. In the Bible, when God called Abraham, He said, "Leave your land and your family." This wasn't just about geography. It was about disconnecting from environments and relationships that could limit God's promise in his life. When you position yourself as someone filled with the Holy Spirit, the environment around you changes. People begin to recognize the fruits of your life, and that's what truly matters. For example, my father-in-law recently asked me how I managed to forgive someone who had wronged us in our home. My response was simple. I never had an issue with that person. How can I forgive someone I didn't have a problem with? That's Christianity. Turning the other cheek, acting with grace, and letting your fruit speak louder than your words. If you constantly say, "I'm a Christian," or try to convince others with arguments, it might lead to more conflicts than conversions. What impacts people isn't what you say, but what you live. Your fruits must speak for you. Remember, God gave a word about Ishmael. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. Historically, this prophecy holds true, but there's something deeper here. Despite this description, Ishmael and Isaac came together at the end to bury their father, Abraham. That's powerful. It's a reminder that regardless of differences or conflicts, there is always space for reconciliation in God's purpose. Now about changing your environment. Many times we feel the need to leave where we are because the environment is pulling us down. It's not about rejecting your origins, but about finding a place that allows you to grow. Even small changes can have a huge impact. Once I suggested that an employee move to a different neighborhood. She lived in a place where the energy was heavy, and it affected her. When she moved to Alphaville, her perspective completely shifted. She told me, "The energy here is different. It's not about despising where you came from, but recognizing what's necessary for your growth." Changing your environment can be a crucial step in unlocking your potential. Finally, one last thing. Go take care of your life. It may sound simple or even abrupt, but it's essential. Taking care of your life isn't selfish. It's about aligning yourself with God's purpose for you. When you take care of your life, you become a blessing to others. So go, take care of what God has placed in your hands, and live the fullness of the purpose He has reserved for you.